Alright, how's it going everyone? Gamma Fighter here, coming at you with another Sylvaneth video, and in this video we're going to be going over the different battle tactics in the new General's Handbook and how well the Sylvaneth units are able to complete them. But first, before we get into it, just a little disclaimer, I'm mostly a hobbyist. I do not play competitively, I play very casually, so I like the hobby aspect of it the most, and I just also like thinking about the stuff for the rules and everything like that. And so I'm theory crafting here. I haven't played a ton of games. I haven't played on the new GHB, but I don't have a ton of like top level experience in tournaments and stuff like that to where I'm like drawing on this wealth of knowledge and stuff. I'm just trying to figure it out. This is the kind of stuff that I think about, and I'm kind of working through these thoughts already in my own head. And so rather than do that, I like to do it out loud and put it on YouTube. And if other people can comment and share their own thoughts as well, so it's a fun little thing to do. The other thing is I can make mistakes. I may have some of these rules wrong, so please double check before you go out buying stuff to build a list or whatever, before you go running a list in a tournament. Make sure that you've got the rules correct before you do that, because if you're just relying on me, I may get them wrong. Another thing is I'm mostly just trying to see how the developers are expecting us to play as they're designing the rules and the units and stuff like that. What are they thinking is going to work and what's going to be good? But the developers don't always find the optimal way to do it. But I'm trying to read what they're communicating to us through the rules. So I may have it totally wrong. If you watch my first couple of videos, that's kind of what happened. Didn't get everything right at all. Yeah, I identified a couple of really good units and stuff like that, but yeah, wasn't perfect or anything like that. And then finally, this is just for fun and entertainment, not financial advice. Don't go out spending a bunch of money on stuff just because some guy on YouTube said it. I'm just trying to have some fun, and maybe you guys can have fun too. So let's go over the tactics really quick. If you want to read the tactics, this is my summary version of them so that they all fit into like one screen. But you can pause it here and read them out loud. But I'm going to be going over basically what they want you to do, generally speaking. So for Master of the Paths, the kind of units that are going to be good here are going to be like cheap units where you can have a lot of them, so you can have more of your units in the territory and stuff like that. Have a bunch of units in the corner not doing anything, so you want some cheap units and a lot of units for that. For Restless Energy, mostly they want you to get to objectives and clear enemies off of them, so you want a really strong, powerful army that may be reinforced elite type of stuff. Similar for Intercept and Recover, you're going to be slaying enemy units, so you want to be able to hit very hard and get to where you need to go. Specifically, though, you're looking for 3 specific units, so the mobility is going to be more important for Intercept and Recover. Wrathful Spirits or Wrathful Cycles is a little bit all over the place because the first 2 kind of want you to be like low unit count and a lot of combat units, and the second 2 kind of want you to have cheap chaff type of units that maybe don't want to be in combat. So we're going to have to deal with Wrathful Cycles on a case-by-case basis. Scouting Force definitely want fast, cheap units where you don't mind if they're not in combat because they're cheap or because they have a shooting attack, something like that. And then mobility is going to be very important. And then Attuned Gairan, yeah, once again, it's kind of a hammer and anvil kind of a situation, or like where it's a little bit split. The first 2 want you to be defensive, like have very defensive units, and then the second 2 want you to have offensive units. So for the sort of bait and trap battle tactic, you want to have at least 2 of the units need to be able to survive a round of combat from the enemy, and then you want the other 2 units to be killy, go in, slay the enemy unit, that type of stuff. So that's what we're looking for. So that's when I will be talking about what battle tactics the units are good at scoring or denying. That's what I'm looking for in these different things. So for Allariel is a fantastic unit. She's great at surviving. She's great at dealing damage, being a big old body, getting in the way of stuff. And on top of that, she is a 3-cast wizard, and she can resurrect units on a 4-up, which is really incredible. She's very, very powerful. She's great as a combat piece and at supporting your combat stuff. But for this General's Handbook, she's not super good at doing the tactics. So she can do a lot of them. She can slay heroes, she can slay enemies, she can take objectives by killing enemies off of them, but she's not necessarily fantastic at doing the tactics. Her ability to kill is pretty good, but not for how many points she costs. She's not super incredible in that way. So she's not going to be able to go like directly toe-to-toe with incredibly powerful units. She is very defensive as a unit, and yeah, she's got good healing and stuff like that, and that's how she was used in the previous General's Handbook. But in this one, I don't know that she's going to be perfect for scoring battle tactics in particular. There's going to be a lot of objectives going on, and it's not going to be as good to have one big body in the middle that's using up like almost half of your points of your army, having her just fight in the middle is not possibly not be as strong. So all that being said, it doesn't mean like this question mark doesn't mean that she's like a bad unit. Her playstyle is that she can outvalue the enemy. So she can outlast the enemy, she can heal through the damage, she can get out of trouble if she's in trouble, and then recover really quickly and then get back into the fight. She can also bring units back, which of course is a great value. So you're going to have to use a different playstyle if you're playing as Allariel. You're not going to be going for completing the max battle tactics necessarily. Maybe more so you're trying to wear the enemy down, maybe table them, maybe deny them from scoring battle tactics more so. So I think that Allariel is a very strong unit, but I think she will see a lot less usage in this General's Handbook just because the battle plans and the battle tactics aren't super suited for her. She's great for intercept and recover because she is our toughest body, and she has great healing and stuff, like I said, and she has ways to get out of trouble if she does get caught. She's not perfect for intercept and recover because you do need her out there in the front, and the opponent is going to try and kill her anyways. So by killing her, they will also score the battle tactic, which gives them sort of like 2 wins in one. So Allariel, yeah, that's what I think of her. Moving on, the other like meta-defining unit in Sylvaneth last GHB was Belthanos, and Belthanos is incredible as well. He has great combat utility, he has great scoring potential as well on top of that, and he's also really good at denying enemy tactics too. So one thing that he can do is he can hunt down chaff. He has great movement, he has solid damage. He can't go toe-to-toe with like the biggest, baddest anvil units and take those out. He can't go toe-to-toe with the greatest hammer units and take those out and stuff like that. But stuff like the scouting force kind of units, the things where they need to be in the corners of the battlefield, the type of units that are going to be doing that, he should be pretty strong against and be able to hunt those down. So you can use him to like sort of guard the terrain features and the objectives in your territory, and then if the opponent tries to come in, teleport in, whatever it is, with their scouting force to score something like scouting force, then Belthanos can get into them and take them out and either have them be in combat and then not qualify for the scouting force tactics, or he can completely wipe them out. He's very good at that, and on top of that, he gives up to 3 units run and charge on your turn, and so that's he can do that across the whole board. So it doesn't really matter where he is. So you can keep him out of danger, out of trouble. You can put the enemy intercept and recover like Gyronite treasure onto him, and he can stay out of the way. But he can still do important, valuable stuff for you while being incredibly elusive and able to get out of the way. I've also seen a lot of people use him for being able to snipe. Because of his rampage, being able to like jump around and stuff like that, because of his big movement and able to give himself run and charge, he can get to places where the opponent doesn't expect him to be able to, take out a key foot hero or artillery piece or something like that, which is very powerful. It's very risky though, because you don't want to do that like turn 1 and then have him die, and then all of your mobility is gone for the whole rest of the game. So it can be really risky, but that makes him really good at scoring all these tactics. Mostly he empowers your other units to be able to score them, but there are some that he can really help score as well. As I shared, like being able to get a foot hero in the back and stuff like that. And he's also very good at denying the enemy tactics. Because of his great mobility, he can be where you need him to be. He can take out units that are trying to complete battle tactics and stuff like that. I do think that Belthanos is an incredible enabler for almost every strategy, and I think he's going to be really, really good in this General's Handbook going forward. And I think if you don't put him in your list, you're going to have a really good reason why. Maybe that reason is you don't have him, which is a pretty good reason, but you know, that's probably the only reason that I accept, actually. No, you could be going for a different strategy, like you know, I was talking about, you could be going for a different strategy with like Allariel and stuff like that, but not bring Belthanos. But I do think Belthanos is going to be really strong in this General's Handbook. Next, we're going to take a look at Lady of Vines. Lady of Vines is one of my favorite characters. I love just the way that she's built. Not physically, guys. Come on. No, actually, she is my favorite model. Probably in Sylvaneth, probably in the whole game. I painted her this year, and she looks awesome. I really love it. But what I'm trying to say is the design of her is really, really cool. But I think I figured out what the problem is. So she is somewhere between a very defensive buff piece and a combat, like frontline combat hero. But from the perspective of being a pure buff piece, she's too expensive. Her buffs are just not worth the number of points that you have to spend to get to her. But then as a combat unit, she's also too vulnerable. She's too fragile, and she's too easily picked off. So she can't really last in combat, and even beyond combat, she can get shot off the board or taken out with magic way too easily. So she is just kind of in between, and that's kind of what I like about her. I think that's a really cool aspect. But in terms of like competitive games, trying to win a tournament and stuff like that, she just doesn't really fit in because of that. So her buff, she gives a 5-up ward in 12 inches around her, which is a really powerful ability, but it really does require her to be straight up in the front. She cannot benefit from obscuring. She only partially benefits from the lookout sir, whatever they're calling it now. She's just too vulnerable to be able to do the job that she needs to do. Her rampage is really good, but then if you use her rampage, that means she's in combat, which is not good. So it can help her survive a little bit more, but it's still very risky, especially like this idea where if you put her with Dryads or with a Treelord or something like that, the enemy is going to target her instead of the chunkier target. So she can kind of provide some kind of support, but they're not just going to ignore the unit that she's supposed to be supporting. So it's not good. Shooting may be going down in this General's Handbook. It's not dead. Shooting's not dead, but shooting may be going down because there's so much obscuring and stuff like that. So that could make her a little bit more viable, but overall, I think we're going to see her more in the same way. She works really only for battle tactics in Attuned to Ghyran. On the defensive side, she could be in the middle, doing the seize the center part with something like a Treelord or with Dryads like I talked about. If you can get that 5 ward off, then she can be pretty defensive. Her rampage gives -1 for the enemy to hit her. Treelord can give -1 for the enemy to wound. Treelord Ancient can give the enemy strike last if you pair her with one of those. And it's not a huge amount of points. It's under 500 points. And it's fairly tanky, but against stuff like true reinforced hammers, reinforced chaos chosen, chaos knights and Varangard, stuff like that, like really heavy hitters, she just crumbles. So she's really not strong enough for anything like that. So you do have to be careful. Like even the one that I really think is the only one that she's really good at, it's only against certain armies. You have to be really careful with it still. And then for denying, so she can sit back in your territory and try to deny scouting force and like guard terrain and objectives and stuff like that. And she can do pretty good against chaff units. She is like 2 Kurnoth Hunters duct taped together as far as her damage output, even a little bit better than that. So that's not bad. But so against chaff, that's really good. But as far as like real combat, she's not that good. For intercept and recover, I guess you could theoretically hide her away. But again, then you're spending a lot of points on a buff unit where she's only able to like cast spells. She could put down a Wicked Wildwoods and terrain, or, give the rend on that and stuff like that. You're not getting her best spell, which is her ward spell. So she's really not that great at denying battle tactics either. Okay, moving on to Drycha. Drycha, I figured out that she is kind of the same thing as Lady of Vines, except the new Scourge of Ghyran Drycha is more offensive based, first of all, which is generally going to be preferred because, if you destroy the enemy unit, then that's the perfect defense. The best defense is a good offense because they can't fight you back when you've already destroyed them. So her being offensive version of like this combo between a combat piece and a buff piece, that's already better than the Lady of Vines. But on top of that, the new Scourge of Ghyran Drycha, they increased her points quite a bit, but they also gave her a bit more durability, a bit more movement, and a bit more destroying power. So I feel like it's just enough to push her over the edge to where it's actually useful. And I feel like maybe if they did the same thing with the Lady of Vines, they gave her a little bit higher points cost, but gave her a little bit better, more durability, better movement, and a little bit more damage and stuff, that would actually possibly help her to be viable. So right now I do think the Drycha is viable. So she's not particularly fast. She does have a 10-inch move, which is fine, but she can't fly or anything like that. She's not incredibly durable. She's not incredibly damaging. She is fine for a hero at her points cost, but she's not really incredible in terms of like combat stuff. But she can shred chaff, and she can shred, like smaller heroes and stuff like that, especially if there's any enemy army or anything that relies on wards to save them. She ignores wards, and so she's really powerful against those. The problem is she has trouble getting to them because she's not super incredibly fast. However, paired with Belthanos, I do think she does have a shot at being a fairly usable unit for sure, as far as like her combat ability. But even beyond her combat ability, as I said before, she is a support piece as well. So first of all, she is good at denying enemy battle tactics, as well as denying enemy primaries, capping objectives, because her rampage can give, was it -2 to the charge? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't. Minus D3, that's what it is. On average, that's 2. But yeah, I have the documents open just to check. But she can give minus D3 to the enemy charge, or the enemy unit gets -1 to their hit rolls and +1 to our units to hitting them. So that's a pretty big damage swing. So if their battle tactic is about killing an enemy unit or about taking an objective, either one of those is really powerful. If the opponent chooses to shorten their charge and then they don't make their charge, well, that means they're never going to complete that tactic during that turn, because they're not going to be able to fight you because they didn't hit their charge. And then if they choose the -1 to hit, +1 to hit type of thing, then that's increasing the chances that your guys survive and decreasing the chances that their guys survive. And then if they do less damage to you, then you have a stronger unit that's hitting back at them with more damage with that +1 to hit, just making it all the more powerful. So they're less likely to be able to cap an objective off of you. The only problem with this, with her rampage, is that it's tricky. It's very tricky and difficult to know when to use it, and on which units and that type of stuff. Because if it's shortening the charge, but then the enemy has a guaranteed charge anyways, then you wasted it. Yeah, so it's about knowing when to use it is going to be kind of this is the biggest, like, highest skill unit in the army possibly at this time, in the faction. But that ability with her rampage, even though it's going to be very tricky to use, it's incredibly powerful if you stop an enemy from getting an objective or deny them a battle tactic. That's huge. The other thing, though, is that she has that War Scroll spell. It gives +1 to wound, and if they're not Kurnoth, then it gives +1 to attacks. And then for the wound, it even works on companion weapons, so it's good for our bug riders, that type of thing. This really helps our units to punch up and be able to get over the breakthrough. What's it called? Is there a phrase for that? My thing is, Sylvaneth unit damage is fine. It's not blow away, insane kind of Varangard Chosen type of damage. My second favorite army is the Slaves of Darkness, so in case you can't tell, that's why I keep referencing them. That's what I know. Our Sylvaneth damage is not super incredible like that. Like, I'm not complaining about our damage, but I'm just saying that it's not to the heights where, like, I'm going to throw this unit, any of our units, throw it in an enemy unit, and I just know that they're going to completely clean them out. That's just not how it works. We have respectable damage, but with this buff from the Drycha's War Scroll spell, that can take it just up a notch to where, like, we can be more reliable in being able to clean out basically any enemy unit. So we just need, like, a little bit of help to get over the edge. Like, you guys ever had it where you put the rend spell on one of your trees? Now all your weapons are like rend 2, like some of the heroes are at rend 3, that type of a thing, and it just helps you to do so much more damage. Like, that's how I think about it. Like, we can do really respectable, serious damage. Maybe I'm going on too long about this normally, but then the buff from Drycha's War Scroll spell can take it up a notch to where we know we can wipe them out. So she herself is not super great at completing these battle tactics, but she really can enable your other units to be able to complete them. So something like Intercept and Recover she may not be able to necessarily go around and get that enemy unit that has the Gyronite treasure that's hiding in the back, but she can buff up the Revenant Seekers, and they have the movement and the fly ability to where they're able to get there and get in the back and clean up the enemy unit that's hiding back there. Yeah, so that's a really important piece, I think, to the army, is being able to get those buffs off and help out our units. So I do think she has a place here. You can use her in the Tune to Gyran as the hammer part of that for the bait and trap type of thing. You know, like I said here, you know, maybe intercept and recover, although she's not super maneuverable in that type of a thing. Maybe restless energy. She does help us to table the opponent better. If you want to go for an all-out offense where the goal is to try and table the opponent, then she is a really important piece for that because of the incredible damage buff that she can give, as well as being able to bypass swords with her attacks, that type of a thing. As far as denying battle tactics, you know, I do feel like I talked about Drycha enough. All right, so Master of the Paths, you know, I don't know. She can be... What can she do? Yeah, I don't know about that. Restless energy. She helps your units to be able to fight better and get the -1 to hit, -1 to, or +1 to, -1 to hit, +1 to be hit type of stuff. So she helps you to survive and resist your objectives being taken over, stuff like that. So there we go. Moving on to the Warsong Revenant. Now, the Warsong is not a combo piece. This is a pure buff piece and really a control piece. It has a few unique things that really make it stand out. So it can get +1 to unbind and to banish, which is really powerful for controlling the battlefield, stopping your opponent from doing exactly what they want to do. It can also lower enemy wards by 1, which is a unique ability and very strong. And can give your guys a 6-up ward. Unlike the Lady of Vines, he is not a monster. He is flying, but he's not a monster, so he can benefit better from the Lookout Sir rule. So the Warsong Revenant really is not good at scoring these battle tactics on his own, but he does help. He can deny, so he can set up the Awakened Wildwoods, he can set up the Ren spell, he can do chip damage with his War Scroll spell, as well as the other Sylvaneth damaging spell. So he can really help soften up stuff and enable your guys to be able to score the battle tactics. But he himself doesn't score battle tactics very well. And then as far as denying goes, he can help your guys to survive, get with that 6-up ward, help your guys to be better defensively and stuff like that. So he can sort of enable your other units to be able to better deal with the enemy battle tactics. As far as an intercept and recover holder, like for the Gyronite treasure, he's pretty good. He's susceptible to shooting because he is flying, but not, you know, entirely, and he's not very strong defensively. But he can also hide away and out of the way, and he doesn't necessarily need to be up at the front line, and he can still be effective using his 2 casts to be able to affect the battlefield. So he's possibly an intercept and recover holder. Arch Revenant is in a weird spot. The way that the War Scroll is written, it feels like Games Workshop thinks that the Arch Revenant is a combat hero that also has a little bit of a buff on top of it, but it's definitely not a combat hero. It is terrible in combat. Even against Chaff, I would be scared to send the Arch Revenant in and be worried that the Arch Revenant would not make it out alive against Chaff units. It is just not very good. So then as a support piece, it is non-unique, so it can carry an artifact, it can carry a heroic trait, but it's not very good at that. It's not terrible, but like it's pretty bad, you know. Yeah, like I'm just thinking of like Spellsinger. It can become a 1-cast wizard when it's near Awakened Wildwoods, but why would you pay more for the Arch Revenant when you could just have the Branchwych that can do that without Spellsinger? It's already a 1-cast wizard, so it's just not very good at that. So all that you really end up with is it gives Kurnoth Hunters +1 to wound in combat, and that's about it. But it needs to be near the Kurnoth Hunters to be able to do that, and I just don't think it's worth the points for that. So I really don't think it's very good at anything. I don't think it's good for scoring battle tactics. Technically, maybe for Scouting Force, it could tie something up in combat, so it can't qualify for Scouting Force. I guess you could put Intercept and Recover on it and have it hide in a corner, and your army wouldn't change that much by removing the Arch Revenant to protect it for Intercept and Recover. But that's not a very like glowing praise, right? Like that's not a good review to say like you can put the Intercept and Recover on it and have the Arch Revenant stay out of the way and do nothing all game and you wouldn't notice a difference. That's not very good. So I don't think the Arch Revenant is going to be very good, and we'll look at the tier list later. Spoiler alert, I think the Arch Revenant is the only unit that is truly unusable until it gets a buff. Okay, moving on to the Spirit of Durthu. So the Spirit of Durthu is fairly straightforward. It is a damaging piece. It is pretty good at damage. It is pretty good at durability. It's got really low movement. So what does that mean? It means that it's good at completing the stuff that makes you want to capture objectives and destroy enemy units and stuff like that. But it needs help. It needs either some kind of a delivery system to get it there. A lot of times that's Belthanos, giving it run and charge. Or it needs durability, some ward support, stuff like that, to help it stay alive so that it can clap back against the enemy completely. Yeah. So pretty straightforward on the Spirit of Durthu. It's pretty hard for him to deny enemy tactics because he can't go out and get to where you need him to be to do that very often. So like it's not that it's impossible, it's just that he doesn't really excel at that. He's got like a 5-inch movement. Let's double check that. Yeah, he's got a 5-inch movement. So he, with run and charge, he could, if there's a Scouting Force thing that thinks it's safe, like an enemy scouting unit that is standing on the side, thinks it's safe, Spirit of Durthu may be able to get there with a solid charge and a good run roll, stuff like that. But for the most part, that's not really the key role that you want him for. You want him to be taking stuff out, and it's pretty straightforward. He's a solid choice and pretty good. I like him with the Glamour Weave because it just helps him. He has a low volume of attacks. Even in shooting, he's got 5 attacks. But yeah, his Guardian Sword has 5 damage on it at Ren 2, and he only has 4 attacks with it. So the being able to like reroll the hit and wound roll on for like one time is very good. I really like that. So I really like the Spirit of Durthu. Yeah, moving on. Okay, Treelord. So the Treelord is a very defensive piece. It's a decent anvil. It only costs 220 points currently, and it's got solid durability for such a point cost. It's also got a defensive rampage, giving the enemy -1 to wound, which is fine, and helps every little bit. So this is a efficient use of your points if you just need something with 5 control to sit on a point or just block the way or something like that. This is a pretty good piece for that. It can work as the Attuned to Ghyran anvil, so seize the center with the Treelord and another anvil type of unit. It should be able to survive combat when the enemy charges into it, and then you retreat the Treelord on the second turn for the second battle tactic and have your hammers pile in, and well, not pile in, that's a official term in the game. Have the true hammers charge in and defeat the enemy unit. There you go, you've completed your battle tactic. Yeah, maybe for Wrathful Cycles, because it can fight, it can help you control stuff. It can be in the quarter of the battlefield, and even if it's not a very important quarter, you can just send the Treelord there, and that's fine. It's not super mobile or anything, though. The thing is, so it's okay for completing some battle tactics, denying some battle tactics, that type of a thing. What's nice is that it's fairly cheap, so it is kind of a sacrificial piece. So like with the Attuned to Ghyran stuff, you don't care if you're wasting a turn with it by retreating. You don't care if it gets taken out by tying something up for a turn. It doesn't really matter that much because that's kind of what you put it in there for. It's sort of a sacrificial piece. It does crumble against true hammers, but in this General's Handbook, if we are going to start to see minimum size units, not reinforced hammers, or just like weaker hammers overall that are more mobile, then the Treelord may be able to grind some of those down for a little bit, or kind of hold them in place for a turn and have your true hammers come in and smash into them, do kind of a hammer and anvil style play. The question is that going to happen? If the enemies become weaker, then the Treelord becomes better. But against these true hammers that we've been seeing, reinforced Chosen, reinforced Varangard, the Treelord's not able to stand up to those. But if we do see like a lower caliber, then the Treelord will gain a lot of value. Okay, the Treelord Ancient is very similar to the Treelord, same defensive profile. The combat is a little bit different, the shooting is a little bit different, so I think the Treelord's a little bit weaker overall damage, but in exchange it gets, it costs 20 points more, and then in exchange for that it gets Wizard 1, so that's really nice, and then it gets Fight Last Rampage on a 4-up instead of the -1 to wound Rampage. And Fight Last is very good. 4-up isn't incredible, but when it does go off, oh baby, yeah, you love it. And that's a pretty big deal for just 20 points. 20 points is not a lot for those benefits. So all the same kind of stuff applies to the Treelord Ancient. It's a little bit better at some of these battle tactics because it can enable others with that one cast. If you missed your Awakened Wildwood, they can try and put it down again. Or if you got the Awakened Wildwood out, now you can use the Treelord Ancient to cast the Ren spell or something like that. It has a little bit of Wordle chip damage too with the Awakened Wildwood combo type of thing, which is not super important, but it's just similar to the Treelord, but with just a little bit added utility on top of that. Okay, moving on to the Branchwych. So this is our only wizard that is not a monster or flying. So this is our cheapest little one-cast wizard, and you can tuck it away to deny battle tactics and hide, and still can do stuff with casting spells and things like that. The main thing, though, is she has a War Scroll ability where she gives an ally fights first on a 3-up during the enemy turn. And so this is incredible for deterring enemy units from charging into you, much like the Treelord Ancient Fight Last Stomp, Rampage. This is really incredible. It's on a 3-up, which is, of course, even better than on a 4-up. You could combine the two of them, but you can tuck her behind a wall of like Kurnoth Hunters and stuff like that. You know, like the slower moving type of things. She can give them fights first. If any enemy charges into you on their turn, then she can give strikes first, and she's got more than a 50-50 chance, like better than 50-50, of giving your unit strike first during the enemy turn. It's incredibly deterring for the enemy to want to charge into you. If you can put the unit on obscuring terrain as well, then they can't just get shot off and weakened that way. So it can be incredibly powerful for defensive abilities. So as you might expect, she herself is not very good at scoring the battle tactics, but she can support them. She can support your anvil during Attuned to Gairan. She can support your units completing Master the Paths. You know, she's just another body for Master the Paths type of thing. She can deny, intercept, and recover because she can be one of the best defended heroes in the entire game, it feels like. Although she's very fragile, but she can hide away and stuff like that. Then, yeah, Master the Paths, she can kind of help deny just because she's more bodies, that type of a thing. And then Restless Energy, your opponent has to take objectives off of you to complete Restless Energy. So if you can put her on an objective with a reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters, they're not getting that objective this turn. Maybe later, but not this turn. Moving on to the Gossamid Archers. So this is one of our cheap shooting units. It has a 12-inch flying movement, and then it can do shoot and scoot. So that's a really useful kind of unit to have. It can be hard to pin down, and it can be used to soften enemy targets. The shooting is not very good. It's only 12 inches, and it's not very high damage. Let me see. 12 inches, yeah. And the damage is not very good. 2 attacks each. On 3/3s, rend 1, damage 1, crit auto wound. So it's not incredible. You're not completely clearing screens or anything like that. You can help soften things up, but this is sort of like a objective grabber and battle tactic completer that also has the added bonus of being able to do just a little bit of chip damage to the enemy. It's good at any of those tactics that require you to have a lot of units or units in different places or a lot of units type of thing. Very good for that because it's so cheap and mobile. It's also good at denying for any of the tactics that require your opponent to have positioning or to outnumber you, stuff like that. So also very good carrier for the intercept and recover because they are very slippery. They can get around very quickly and they can fly over terrain to get to safety all that kind of stuff is very, very good for intercept and recover. So you can imagine if you go for something like a scouting force with the Gossamid Archers, you can use them to complete the first one, easy. You complete the second one, maybe you have to be a little careful, but it's definitely possible while keeping them safe and out of trouble. And then you can have, some Tree Revenants or something complete the third one and have your Gossamid Archers holding the enemy's Gyronite treasure, and they just fly back and they just hide in the corner. And you don't really care. You don't really miss that little bit of chip damage. If you can get the chip damage, it's nice, but you can just have them hide in the corner. Or they have enough shenanigans with movement and stuff where they can stay out of trouble and dance around the periphery of the enemy without really being in danger. Although that's sort of a high skill type of thing, But yeah, so that if you can use them to score you 10 points on Scouting Force and then deny the opponent 5, 10, 15 points on Intercept and Recover, depending on how many Gossamid Archers you bring, that's really good value for just 120 points. So I do think that Gossamid Archers, especially if you're going for Scouting Force, they are a very strong choice to bring in the current General's Handbook. Moving on to the Twistweald. Twistweald's in a little bit of a weird place. So they don't have great damage and they don't have great durability. It's efficient for the number of points that they cost, but they only cost 100 points. So if you're good for 100 points, quote unquote, that's not a compliment, right? So it's like being good at fighting for a 5-year-old, sure, I'll give it to the kid, but that doesn't mean you're good at fighting, right? So it's really kind of hard to find a place for the Twistweald, is what I'm trying to say. They do have a War Scroll ability where they can shorten the enemy charges by D3, but they have to be 6 inches away from friendly Sylvaneth units, so they have to be in a weird position to be able to do that. It might not always be available to you, they're just in a little bit of a weird place. So there's a lot of these units that are right around 100 points. Gossamid Archers are 120, Twistweald's 100, Dryads are 100, and Spite Revenants, Tree Revenants are 100, Spite Revenants are 80. So of all of those units, this is the one that kind of has the least defined role. They are more defensive than the Dryads, except when the Dryads are near Awakened Wildwoods. They get -1 to be hit, -1 to be wounded, and they can become kind of a tar pit. And the Twistweald doesn't get that. The Spite Revenants can do more damage, and they're cheaper, that type of stuff. But the Twistweald is more durable than the Spite Revenants. The Gossamid Archers, they have that movement shenanigans I was just talking about, and the shooting damage. The Twistweald has a tiny bit of shooting damage, but it's not very good. So there's really not much of a place for the Twistweald. And that's kind of one of the things about this exercise, is thinking about what battle tactics they're good at. Technically, yeah, there are 3 battle tactics cards, I'd say, that they can do. But that doesn't really make them good, right? So they're bodies, they're fairly cheap bodies, and that's just kind of good in the GHB currently. But if you just want cheap bodies, go with Spite Revenants. If you want mobile cheap bodies, go with Tree Revenants. If you want mobile cheap bodies that can fly and shoot, go with the Gossamid Archers. If you want tar pit super defensive cheap bodies, go with the Dryads. And the Twistweald is sort of in this middle place between all of them. The only thing they have really is the War Scroll ability, and that they are sort of this rounded version, but I don't know if that we have a place for the rounded version of anything, really. So all you're really left with is that War Scroll ability. It's kind of hard to use, and Drycha has a similar version of that right now. So, combining the two, combining Drycha with Twistweald, could be powerful, but I just don't know that there's a place for Twistweald right now. All right, Spiterider Lancers. So this is tied with as being our fastest hammer unit, so it's good for them. It seems like in this General's Handbook, these battle plans and the tactics and stuff, that mobility is really important, and so that is a point in their favor. But they do really, really need to charge to be able to do any sort of damage, and even then, even on the charge, they don't punch as hard as our strongest hammers, which is the Kurnoth Hunters. So it's really not sure, or it's not really clear what the place is for the Spiterider Lancers. They do get a 3. They do get a strike first and a 3 up, which can be really good. But the problem is it's during your turn, and it's after you already charged. So you don't find out until after you've already committed the bodies, which is a bad situation. All that being said, they are highly mobile, so they are good at doing these different tactics. They can get where you want to be able to take out the enemy unit. They count for scouting force, and so, you know, you don't want them to not be in combat, but they do count for scouting force. A non-reinforced unit could do scouting force, or if you do wipe out the enemy, then you're not in combat anymore, so you can still qualify for scouting force. They could be the hammer in Attune to Gairan. All that kind of stuff. So they are capable of doing the tactics. The only question is, are they capable of slaying the enemy unit? And that's really the question. So once again, I'm bringing this up. If we continue to have durable and high damage output enemies, enemy hammers that we're going up against, then the Spiterider Lancers will continue to underperform. But if we do see a shift to a more fragile enemy hammers, or like MSU style, where you're regularly not going up against a reinforced unit of like enemy hammers or anvils or whatever, Spiterider Lancers do have a chance to excel really good. So they have everything that they need, and they have okay damage, but they just need a little bit more, or they need a little bit weaker enemies before they're really worthwhile. That's why they do pair really well with the new Drycha. With her War Scroll spell, she can really help them punch up higher than they were before and become a real threat. But my fear for the Spiterider Lancers is that they're not going to be strong enough, even if we do shift to a little bit weaker enemy units that we're going up against. The real problem with the Spiterider Lancers, however, is the next unit, which is the Revenant Seekers. Now, and for the record, I'm not going to be going over the regular Drycha or regular Revenant Seekers, because the soggy versions are just so much better that it doesn't really make sense to talk about them. The Scourge Gairan Revenant Seekers just are essentially better than the Spiterider Lancers in every way except for that 3-up fights first, because they just don't have that. But they do more damage. They have crit mortals, and I think they retain their 2 damage, even not on the charge, right? Yeah, it's just the mount that gets +1 damage on the charge. So the damage problem that Revenant Seekers had in the last GHB has been solved with Scourge of Gairan, just giving them better damage. And then on top of that, they do have a 5-up ward on a 3-up. Let me double check that. 3-up, yes. They can either give themselves a 5-up ward or give an allied unit 5-up ward during the hero phase, so that's really good. 5-up ward is very powerful. You can put it on something really durable like a Treelord or a Spirit of Durthu, and help them to super survive. You can put it on something like Kurnoth Hunters, and those become really durable as well. And you can put it on the Revenant Seekers, and they become really durable. So it's a huge help. The best part is it happens in the hero phase. It happens during your turn and during the enemy turn, and you know that it's going to happen during the hero phase. So before you charge in, you know whether or not you're going to have that 5-up ward, which is really, really important. These are still not quite as strong as Kurnoth Hunters, but in exchange for that little bit of a drop-off, and they're more expensive than Kurnoth Hunters. They are $230 for 3, $460 for a reinforced unit. Is that correct? Yeah. So they are quite a bit more expensive than Kurnoth Hunters with scythes or with bows, and they're a little bit less damage, but in exchange for that, you get a 12-inch flying move instead of a 5-inch move. And there you're going to have to decide if that's going to be valuable or not. And they also, like the Spiterider Lancers, they pair really well with the Scourge of Gairan Drycha. They get really, really strong with that, and they take the buff better because than the Kurnoth Hunters, because Drycha's War Scroll spell specifically says that it's better if you're not a Kurnoth Hunter. So, or, Belthanos. So, the Scourge Gairan Revenant Seekers do have a chance at being really powerful. Same thing, though, with the Spiterider Lancers, where if we continue to go up against really durable, really hard-hitting hammers, then it's the same thing. The Revenant Seekers are not going to be quite as good. But if the mobility is going to be more important and we're going up against kind of weaker, more chaffy type of, or no, more glass cannon type of enemies, then the Revenant Seekers are going to be really, really good in this General's Handbook. Moving on to the Kurnoth Hunters with swords. So this is our strongest offensive hammer. And I'll talk more about that later, but I am going to clarify that it's the strongest offensive hammer, okay? So this type of unit, like if you're going to try and go for the, Restless Energies? And I didn't even put Restless Energy on here. If you're going to go for Restless Energy, try to table the opponent, you probably do want to bring at least one reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters because they are our biggest damage unit. And as I said before, we don't super excel at damage. The Kurnoth Hunters are great, but yeah, like you're not going to be tabling the opponent with like Belthanos plus Allariel as your strongest hammers. So you want something like the Kurnoth Hunters with swords. They are also very slow, though, just like Spirit of Durthu. They are 5-inch move. So they're very slow, so they do need help. They need a Belthanos, or they need some durability to survive an enemy charging them and then being able to clap back. They can score all these aggressive tactics, but they're going to need help with it just because they are so slow and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, not much to say. The Kurnoth Hunters with swords are the more aggressive one. They're the ones that want to charge. They deal mortals on the charge. They also have crit mortals, so they have really good damage, very consistent damage. And then the other version is the Kurnoth Hunters with scythes. So this is the more defensive version. And if you're like me, you might think, well, it's a hammer unit, so the offensive version of it is going to be better. But you'd be wrong, at least according to my viewers. The nice comments people left helped me to see a little bit different perspective. Yeah, that was kind of my perspective, is like, hey, it's a hammer unit, then the offensive one must be better. But actually, because they're so slow, I think that the scythes are probably the better unit for our army and just for how the unit functions. So what you can do is you can have these guys stand there on a point. They get a 6-up ward from the objective, from their War Scroll ability. You could have a Branchwych with them to give them fights first on a 3-up. And when they get charged, they get +1 rend, and they deal mortals to the enemy that charge them. So they're very, very strong. When they get charged, they do the most damage out of all of our units, especially if they get the fights first and they don't get hit first, then they are doing a ton of damage and absolutely deleting the enemy, and it's very terrifying for the enemy. With, like I talked about before, obscuring and a Branchwych on there, these are just monsters. So yeah, incredible. But they have the same kind of thing as the Kurnoth Hunters with swords. They can wipe out the enemy. These are the unit that has the most reliable power to be able to wipe out our enemies and table the enemy. But they're very slow, so they need some help, support to be able to do that, either by playing a more defensive style with the Branchwych or with Belthanos giving them run and charge, all that kind of stuff, to be able to get them in there at some point. Okay, moving on, Kurnoth Hunters with bows. So in the previous General's Handbook, it was like, especially at the beginning, it was like mandatory to take a reinforced unit of these and then use covering fire during every enemy's turn, and you were just shooting and shooting and shooting. Really incredible damage output at a really long range. But with the changes to obscuring, as well as with the changes to all-out defense, it may be better to take one non-reinforced unit or even two non-reinforced units of these guys. But, because with the obscuring, with the changes to all-out defense, shooting's not quite as good, but the kind of units that are going to excel in shooting are kind of like Kurnoth Hunters with bows, where they can teleport around to get the positioning that they need to take the shot. So they only move 5 inches, so if the enemy is like not in a position that they can shoot from, you can teleport them to a different Awakened Wildwood where they have a shot, is kind of what I'm saying. And those are the kind of units, the shooting units, that are still going to be valuable in this General's Handbook. I don't think shooting's completely dead. I can definitely see taking one of these, or even two min-sized units of these guys. It's just that it's not mandatory anymore. you do have to design your army around it. Like, so you have to have that in mind. These like if you were going to be going with something like Revenant Seekers, which don't have quite the damage output of the Kurnoth Hunters with scythes, you could bring Kurnoth Hunters with bows to soften up whatever target the Revenant Seekers are going to charge into. And that's a great way to play it. Kurnoth Hunters with bows are not going to be able to completely wipe out enemy screens. They could do it over a couple of turns, especially if you're doing covering fire during the enemy turn to kind of wear them down. But it's mostly supportive damage to be able to help out your units to be able to punch up a little bit and finish things off. So they're very good, as you might expect, with the scoring of the tactics. They aren't directly scoring most of these tactics. They are mostly helping to support your other units to be able to complete them, softening up a unit for intercept and recover, softening up a unit to take the objective with your other unit, etc. They do work for Master of the Paths as bodies, just as a unit. And they also work for Scouting Force, where they don't need to be in combat to be doing what they want to do and be doing the damage they need to do. So you can definitely use these guys for Scouting Force, put them by an objective or a terrain piece in enemy territory and have them shooting. And as long as they don't get charged, they qualify for the battle tactic, which is great. They're also capable of denying battle tactics for kind of the same thing. They're just a body. They can soften up a unit before they charge into your unit, so they do less damage, that kind of stuff. Take out a enemy scout unit. They are really durable for a shooting unit, and their damage isn't incredible, but if they're going up against another scout like chaff type of unit, they do really good damage in combat. Shoot them, charge into them, and then you're doing pretty good damage for a shooting, like quote unquote chaff type of a unit. They can do pretty good. And I don't know about Attuned to Gairan. I don't know what I was cooking up with that one. Okay, moving on to Dryads. Dryads are a decent tar pit and screening unit. The problem is that screening's not been very good in this edition. However, with shooting being less prominent, screening could come back. I don't believe that they gain their benefit. So when they're near an awakened wildwood, they're -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded. And actually, it does look like it works against shooting. So I don't know. Maybe they were actually secretly good against shooting in the previous General's Handbook too. But they can work as a tar pit. Their defenses otherwise are trash. They are 1 health each on a 5-up save, and their damage is absolute doo-doo butter. But the -1 to hit and -1 to wound does make it difficult for your enemy to get the damage through that they need to, especially if they're not already hitting on 2s and wounding on 2s. So it can be really strong for that. So it's just a question of seeing whether the screens and stuff is really going to be useful during this General's Handbook. And again, if we do see these non-reinforced hammers that can't quite punch through, Dryads could be a useful tool for keeping those locked down in a tar pit so that your hammer units can come in and sweep them up. Best thing is you don't care if the Dryads die. They only cost 100 points. They're meant to stand there, to screen, to tar pit. Like, this is their job. So we'll have to see if that becomes a viable playstyle going forward. The other thing is, with all this shenanigans with obscuring and things like that, we could end up having tricks that we can do where they actually can be really strong. With obscuring, meaning they can't get shot off, and they become more durable that way. It could end up being that there's a place for them, but I'm not 100% sure that there is at this point. They are just cheap bodies, which is really good for a lot of the battle tactics. Master of the Paths, for Wrathful Cycles, for Scouting Force. You don't care if they're not in combat for Scouting Force because they don't do any damage anyway, so it doesn't make a difference if they're in combat or not. If they're not in combat, they can score Scouting Force. Attuned to Gairan, they even can work as the Anvil. You may want a reinforced unit for that, but that's only 200 points still. So they do work for that as the, seize the center and then the bait and trap. If they're retreating, they're not fighting that turn, you don't care because it's no damage whatsoever. They're also pretty good at denying Master of the Paths because they're more bodies, denying Restless Energy because they can just kind of tar pit. Maybe a reinforced unit may be valuable and just hold them on an obscured objective under an Awakened Wildwood and just have them sit there. It's 200 points and it's stopping your opponent from being able to take that objective. Could be pretty good. intercept and recover, like you may even be willing to, if they're not integral to your scoring plan for your battle tactics, during the opponent's intercept and recover, you could throw a Gyre Knight treasure on a unit of Dryads, hide them in a corner, and who cares? Nobody cares. Same thing with Scouting Force. You could have them standing by some terrain feature. If there's only 2 terrain features in your deployment for the enemy to score Scouting Force, you could have them buy one of them, or you could have 2 units of Dryads by one by each, and then they can't take that terrain feature without being in combat with the Dryads. So yeah, and then, you know, if nothing happens, no loss for you. They're just standing there, but it's no damage lost. Okay, moving on. Tree Revenants, very cool. Teleport utility piece, bad in combat, very fragile, but excellent at positioning. Typically, in the past, these have been really good for scoring battle tactics, really good for claiming objectives, but not quite as much on the battle tactics this season. It really seems like that there aren't a ton of these like easy battle tactics, like take the flanks and things like that they can complete. However, they are incredibly good with Scouting Force. They're absolutely excellent with Scouting Force. Scoring all 3 of the Scouting Force like battle tactics, they are like among the best units in the game for completing that. So that's really good. They're very finely tuned and specialists in Scouting Force. Also good for Master of the Paths because they're just cheap bodies. So if you bring a bunch of bodies to go for Master of the Paths, they could be some of those bodies and score Scouting Force at the same time. So very cool. They can deny Master of the Paths just by being a body. They're also very good at denying intercept and recover, much like the Gossamid Archers. You have them score the first 2 for Scouting Force, hide them in a corner, and deny 5 points to your opponent, 5 points per Tree Revenant. And you're looking at 200 points on 2 units of Tree Revenants, scoring you 10 points and denying the enemy 10 points. That's huge. Like, that's really, really good use. Yeah, and of course, they're also still good at going and capping enemy objectives that are completely unprotected. So if they've got a lot of like reinforced units and they only have like 4 or 5 units on the entire board, it's going to be hard for them to block 3 different objectives on their side of the board. Tree Revenants can swoop in and grab those no problem on these 5 and 6 objective maps. So Tree Revenants do definitely have a place. Very cool units. They're just specialized towards Scouting Force and Master of the Paths, really. Okay, and finally, the Spite Revenants. These units are finally cheap enough to be cheap glass cannon chaff units. They're very slow, so you have a hard time getting them into combat, but if you can get them into combat, oh boy, they are devils, and they look like devils. So yeah, they're pretty comparable. Like a reinforced unit of Spite Revenants is pretty comparable to a non-reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters with swords, but they're just cheaper, they're less durable, and they're worse, but they're cheap, right? So if you can deliver them, get them into position, they can punch way above their weight class. It's just that it's pretty hard to be able to do that. They are cheap bodies, which is really tactically valuable in this General's Handbook. Master the Paths, Intercept and Recover, Wrathful Cycles, Scouting Force, Restless Energy, all these, they're good at scoring those. And unlike the Gossamid Archers and the Dryads and stuff, they're also good at fighting chaff. So Tree Revenants, part of the problem is Tree Revenants are fragile, but they also don't do hardly any damage, even against chaff units. Dryads do like absolutely no damage in combat. Gossamid Archers aren't great in combat, although they can shoot in combat. But Spite Revenants can do some real damage. A reinforced unit can actually really hurt a serious enemy unit. And so against chaff, Spite Revenants are like powerful. Now, if they get hit first, they may just crumple like tissue paper. But if they hit first, then they do a ton of damage to chaff units especially. So Spite Revenants are a legitimate threat. And being only 80 points currently, there's just value in having a lot of little bodies all around the board. And then kind of if you can get the charge off with them, it's kind of like a bonus, right? Good at denying Master of the Paths. Just by being bodies. They could deny intercept and recover, like having an 80-point unit hide in the corner all game. You're really not going to be bothered by losing that damage output because they were probably going to get charged anyways and just crumble. So they could deny intercept and recover, and they can deny scouting force, just like the Dryads and the tree revenants and stuff. Just have them hang back by a terrain feature so that the enemy cannot come in and claim that terrain feature, or else they'll be in combat with the Spite Revenants, and the Spite Revenants do have a legitimate chance of wiping out a chaff unit. So I think there is definitely a place for the Spite Revenants. I don't think that they're going to be auto-includes in every single list, but there's certainly a place for them more now than ever before in 4th edition. All right, with that, we go to the tier list chart. I changed up the tier list a little bit, so I'm going to explain it a little bit, and not go into too much explanation on the units because we did just go through those. I do think Belthanos is the only truly auto-include unit this General's Handbook. If you don't bring Belthanos, you really have to have a very, very good reason. One of those reasons could be you are going for Allariel, and charging and getting that running charge is not going to be as important for you, although they do work very well together. But for the most part, you should probably have Belthanos in your army if you have him. If you don't have him, that's a pretty good reason not to bring him. But other than that, I think he's very, very strong, fits very well with the rules. He himself can score battle tactics. He can deny battle tactics. Super strong. Okay, but other than that, the next tier I would call a solid core to the army. I can see you starting every list with like 4 out of these 6 or 5 out of these 6, maybe even all 6. It depends on what battle tactics you are going to go for. If you're totally avoiding scouting force, like maybe you have no need to bring the Gossamid Archers. If you are, I don't know. If you don't want to worry about shenanigans, maybe you don't bring Drycha, like with the that rampage and stuff like that. I don't feel like you have to bring any of these units, but if you do bring all of them, like I don't think anyone would really question you, like, whoa, you're bringing Spirit of Durthu? Like, yeah, it's good. It's just good. Like, it's good stuff. If you put these in your army, that's a solid core. When I'm building my army, I don't have Belthanos, so I would start with Belthanos, and then I'd start with let's get the Warsong in there, let's get the Spiterider Durthu in there, let's get a reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters, and let's see how many points I'm left with. And then, honestly, probably start adding Branchwych and Drycha, and then if I'm going for scouting force, I put in the Gossamid Archers, and my list is sort of built itself. So any of these are solid and no one's going to question you on it. These next ones, I'm going to say role players. They have a particular job, and it's not 100% clear that the job is needed in this General's Handbook. I think Allariel is an incredible war scroll. She's an incredible unit, and I'm not trying to say that she's bad by putting her in the 3rd one. She was in the top tier last General's Handbook. By putting her here, I'm saying that it's not 100% clear that she's needed in your army, more so. I think there are lists that can go 5-0, can go 4-1 at a tournament that include her. I'm just saying that I don't think at the top competitive end that we're going to be seeing a ton of her in the lists. I could be wrong. She was very prominent last General's Handbook. I think she'll see a little bit of a drop just because the nature of the battle plans and the tactics don't favor her anymore as much. It's like with the Kurnoth Hunters. Like, I don't think these are bad units whatsoever. It's just a question of, do you really need the shooting in your army? If you want to play, if you really like that playstyle, you like what it enables, you like that you can soften targets up or pick little foot heroes off and teleport around, like, it's perfectly viable to throw those in there. If you feel like you don't want to deal with that, then that's fine. Like, they're great with scouting force. Throw them by a terrain feature in the enemy territory and have them just plink away, and you're scoring points with them and stuff. Like, these are really, really good units. As I said with the Tree Revenants as well, incredible unit, great mobility, incredible place for scouting force, but you don't necessarily automatically need these in here. Revenant Seekers are going to be really good. They're great with Drycha. It just goes, we just have to see exactly how the meta shapes out, and whether they're going to be good into the types of armies that we're going up against is more of the question. Whereas like the Kurnoth size paired with a Branchwych, those are always going to be really strong. It's always going to be our strongest option, our biggest damage dealer, all that kind of stuff. The question is, are we going to be in a meta where the mobility is going to be very important, and the Revenant Seekers specifically are going to be able to punch through a lot of stuff. I think they will, personally, but I don't think you ought to include these in your list. I think the Treelord Ancient does have a place as a role player. I put it at the bottom on purpose, though. Not necessarily the other parts of the tier aren't necessarily on purpose, but the Treelord Ancient is, maybe on okay but situational, maybe as a role player. For a defensive piece that's pretty cheap, this is one of our best. It just kind of is the best. It's got great durability and stuff like that. It's a great support piece. Then the 4-up fights last to the enemy as a rampage is really strong. Again, if you don't put it in your list, though, I'm not going to question you on it. Next is okay but situational. The Kurnoth Hunters with swords are our strongest offensive damaging unit. However, you're comparing them to the Kurnoth Hunters with scythes, so they got to lose a little bit compared to that, because why not just bring the cheaper unit? And on balance, I think that they are pretty... pretty comparable. They're pretty much equal. It's kind of a tie between the scythes and swords, but since the scythes are cheaper, we may as well go with the scythes. So we got to knock the swords down a little bit. And the Treelord is in a similar place where the Treelord Ancient does it a little bit better. If you really need those 20 points, I don't think you feel super bad about dropping to a Treelord to save those 20 points. But it's... if you're going to go for a defensive cheap piece, you may as well bring the Treelord Ancient. Other thing is the Treelord can come in another hero's regiment, but that's not as valuable this General's Handbook as it was in the previous one, so not really needed. And then the Spite Revenants, I think they definitely have a place, but it is situational. If you're going for Scouting Force, if you're going for Master the Paths, if you're trying to deny Scouting Force, trying to deny Intercept and Recover, or if you just have 80 points left over in your list, a non-reinforced unit of Spite Revenants is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think they definitely have a place. They're much stronger than the previous GHB, but again, I don't see everyone putting these in their list. For too niche, I do think that the Lady of Vines just doesn't... It's sort of in this liminal place between roles, and that's kind of hurting it, as I talked about extensively. And it's really similar for the Twistweald, where they don't really have a strongly defined role. You can bring them, but they're slotting into a niche, effectively. The Dryads as well, these may end up moving up if we do find some cool shenanigans and movement tricks that we can do with them based on the obscuring and the -1 to hit and wound from the Awakened Wildwood. They could have a role, but I don't think necessarily that they will. And then Spiterider Lancers, just because the Revenant Seekers are just too much stronger than them, that I just don't think it's worth bringing the Spiterider Lancers when the Revenant Seekers are available. In most cases, again, in very niche cases, they can work. A reinforced unit is 50 points cheaper, so if you really, really want that mobility for your list and you need those 50 points, then you could drop it. It can't be 50, can it? No. It's 210, so it's 420. It's 40 points. So yeah, so it's possible. It's niche, and I don't think most people are going to be bringing them. And then, as I said before, the Arch Revenant is the only unit that I absolutely believe needs a buff. So that's it for the tier list. That's it for the breakdown of the battle tactics. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Did I get anything wrong? Is there anything egregious? The tier list is always going to be someone who disagrees with the tier list, right? But especially if you have experience playing in this General's Handbook, let me know if I got something really right or really wrong, what your experience has been. Let me know what your cool lists are that you're running. Like if you have a list that dominates and it uses Allariel or something like that, let us know in the comment section down below. But that's it for me. Feel free to ask any questions, and one of the friendly, helpful viewers will help you out, and I may even respond as well. But that's it for me. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.